We're learning Likkutei Sichot, Volume 2, Parshas Pinchas. So yesterday we had this very interesting sugya, and you didn't ask the necessary question, which is why is it that when it comes to sachar, when it comes to the reward, you can take someone else's reward, but you can't take the mitzvah itself. So how does that work exactly? I mean, if you can't do someone else's mitzvah, how did you get their sachar?
I missed that.
That was the whole point yesterday.
Yeah.
He's saying there's a difference between...
We talked about how we could take somebody else's mitzvah.
Right. So he said, we can't, if the mitzvah belongs to someone else, we'll never be able to take it. Because someone else, that was his premise. That because of that, Pinchas was able to do what he did in spite of the fact that all the Gedolim were there. Right. So they didn't remember, they didn't know, they didn't get involved because it was his. But then you have to ask, so how do you get the sachar if you don't do the actual mitzvah? Why is it that the sachar you can take? How can you take the sachar? Yeah.
It's very similar but completely different to what I heard. That if in shul they're selling aliyot, and somebody says 10, and somebody says 20, and somebody says 15, somebody says...
Yeah, so they have to pay it even though they didn't get it.
Said it, right? So in other words, by voicing it, by doing it, there's a difference.
Yeah, but you did something.
But no, you didn't do anything because you didn't buy.
You
didn't buy.
But
nevertheless,
you had a skama inside of yourself that this is a sum you would pay. So you did something.
I had a skama so that I'm going to take this mitzvah. I can't take it because it's not mine.
Right.
But nevertheless, the Kodesh Baruch Hu will pay you, in inverted commas, the sechar, just like the person who bids for the mitzvah pays the gabbai, because I see a difference.
Okay, so you're right. That's the direction that I was waiting for. You couldn't put it in words, and I think you put it much better. It's called that when a person wants to do a mitzvah, but they weren't able to for various reasons. For instance, it belongs to someone else. I can't do it, but I wanted to do it. Then ma'aleh alav katuv kilo asa. So then, or machshava tova kadosh baruch hu mitzarfa lemaaseh. That when it comes to the realm of doing good, there Hashem does the unification between the deed and the thought. Usually they're not connected. What you think is not necessarily what you do. But here, and it's an explanation in Tanya, why does Hashem do that, right? He explains it in Tanya. The basic idea is that in holiness everything is one. And so even if there was just a thought of doing the good, it's already a levush, it's already some kind of garment on the neshama. So for that garment by itself, the garment of thought, it's enough in order to receive the reward. So that's a very interesting thing about rewards. The rewards can be divvied up infinitely, meaning they're copied over, they're duplicated again and again.
But we're not doing this with the reward.
So I'll give you another example.
Don't be like the guy who serves the master for the reward.
I'll give you another example. That with Chidushei Torah, what he said, yesterday he also mentioned Chidushei Torah, that the Chidush that you have is really yours. Right. If you say a Chidush in Torah, it's yours, it goes to you. Right. But on the other hand, a lot of other people can learn it afterwards. Right. So you see there that
more than that, Moshe Rabbeinu knew it anyway.
Okay. Tell what do you mean he knew it? We said yesterday we explained what Alachad Moshe Sinai means, right? We talked about it. No, who did I talk about it with you yesterday? No, I talked about it with you. I said there was a difference between Alachad Moshe Sinai and Rabbi Akiva, right? So right when we were talking about the Gemara Menachos. So I'll write down the Chiddush, and many people will learn it. They get the reward just as much as I do because they're learning the Torah. The Torah is the Or Memali. Usually Torah is Or Memali. But the act of writing down the Chiddush is a one-time act. Writing down this novel idea, that's a one-time act. That the first person who does it, or who does it maybe even in parallel to others, but they don't know about each other.
That's the super famous story.
Right.
He broke the barrier.
Right.
He brought it down.
Right, he brought it down. But still, if no one else has heard about it, they get sachar, they get the mitzvah just as much as he does. Because that's Hashem's way of dividing stuff up in the world, right? But afterwards, every person who learns it is now receiving the reward. What we mean by the reward is that he gets the tam tov, the good taste of the Torah that he's learning. So I'm learning it for someone who wrote it, someone else who wrote it, but a million other people can read it also. They can also learn it. So in Gan Eden, we're all going to receive reward for the same text that we learned, but there was one person who wrote the text. That's true. So in that sense, the reward is easily split between many, many people. That's the whole point of Memale. Memale is not a one-time event. Sovev is. And that's a very important difference between the two.
Just one second. Why did you say the reward is split? Why can't you say the reward
It's duplicated. It's duplicated. I meant duplicated. So it's duplicated it can be duplicated as many times as you want. In fact, in Gan Eden, that's why we say many times that some people are in the same chamber. What do we mean they're in the same chamber? We mean to say that they have a stake in this room and in this room and in this room, every room that they learned. So for instance, if they learned Mishnah, and they know Mishnah, so they have a stake in Rebbe's room, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, right? They have a stake there. They sit there also. But this guy also learned Tosefta, so he has also Rabbi Chia. Every person, depending on what he learned, he has a stake in that room. He's receiving reward for that. Okay? But when it comes to the act itself cannot be split. That's one of the main differences between Ola Sovev and Ola Memale. Ola Memale can be copied and pasted as many times as you want. Ola Sovev cannot. It's unique. But that's what's so strange about it, because it's actually paradoxical. That Ola Memale, the integrated light, the light that we call the reward, even though it's duplicated, it's not identical. It's not identical because each person understands however much he understands. So some people will sit in Rebbe's chamber and hear Mishnah all day long. They'll understand. Some will understand more, some will understand less. Okay? It's not that Rebbe's chamber is now divided into a million different levels of understanding. In general, they're all in the same place. Everybody's sitting in the same place. But when it comes to a mitzvah, every person is on his own. The act itself, every person is on their own. Nobody else can do it for them. But interestingly, they have the same value exactly. In spite of the fact that they're not duplicated. They're completely separate acts. Me putting on tefillin and Moshe Rabbeinu putting on tefillin is two completely different acts. They can never be copied from one to the other. On the other hand, their value is exactly the same. And so it's a paradoxical state. Again, this is what to think about. Okay, so now we're in section 2. Section 2 is a little shorter. לגבי פנחס נאמר פנחס זה אליהו, ונשאלת הקושיה, הרי תחילה היה פנחס, ולאחר מכן היה אליהו. This is a famous Sichot. The Rebbe says, the Gemara says Gemara says, here he doesn't bring the Gemara here anywhere. It says the Targum Yonasan, the Yalkut Shimoni, and the Zohar, and the Ralbag, and so on, that Pinchas was Eliyahu. But the question is the famous question. First he was Pinchas, then he was Eliyahu. So what should you say? Eliyahu is Pinchas. Elijah is a reincarnation of Pinchas, not the other way around. התירוץ לדבר הוא לפי הנאמר בזוהר שאליהו היה עוד קודם לכן, אלא שלא היה זילוד אישה. So he says, the Zohar explains that really what it's saying is that Pinchas is Eliyahu, means that Eliyahu was actually existed earlier than Pinchas did. Why? Because Eliyahu was always an angel before. And he came down in the form of a person. He wasn't born to a woman, but he was an angel. Ki malach. ולכן נאמר פנחס זה אליהו. Okay, very nice. So that's the teretz. But what does this mean? What do you take from this? Mashma'ut advarim b'avodat Hashem hi. So we have to understand what the everyday lesson is, the everyday instruction. הרי הוסבר לאל כי כל אחד נדרש לא לבדוק אחרי הזולת כי אם לבצע כל עניין הבא לידו. ונשאלת השאלה, מניין לקחת כוח לכך? So it says, where do we take we said before that if you find an issue that nobody's picked up, nobody's touched it, then you have to pick it up. You have to take care of it, whatever the issue is. People don't put on tefillin. So why aren't all the Gedolim yelling to their congregations, to their communities, go out on the street and put tefillin on people?
I have to do it. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, who am I? He says, like about himself. He says, what can I do? All the Gedolim, they don't say anything. So I have to. It's mine. So every person has to not look at what other people are doing, but to do whatever comes to hand. Where do you get the strength to do something like this? ניתנים לו כוחות לכך, וייתכן אף שמתלבש בו ניצוץ שמי שאינו ילוד אישה. So he says, from Pinchas' Eliyahu, from that we learned that how did Pinchas have strength? The reason they told us that Eliyahu was an angel was to explain that Pinchas took his strength from an angel. Sometimes even an angel will incarnate in a person in order to give him the strength to do this thing that nobody else is willing to do. So you should know that, I can't tell you for sure, but the fact that there's something that's come into your hands, and you're the one who was chosen from above to do this, so they'll give you all the strength that you need from above, including, and even to the point of incarnating an angel inside of you to give you that strength.
Including not being annoyed with people.
Right. We have a couple minutes left. Section 3. ההוראה שבדבר לאברכים שבדורנו שאין עליהם לערוך חישובים שפלוני מסוגל לעשות ופלוני מסוגל לעשות, ושכל דבר הבא לידם עליהם לדעת, חלקם הם, ויש להם כוחות לכך, וצריכים הם לעשותו במסירות נפש. So, same thing by us. Avrechim says, people who are married in our generation should not be calculating, this person could have done this, and that person could have done this. If they didn't do it, but rather anything that comes to your hands, anything that you have a chance to do, any good deed that you have a chance to do, even if nobody else has picked it up, nobody else has figured it out, you have an obligation to do it. Because he's not saying. I don't know, I have to see the Yiddish. מסירת נפש, כפי שאמר הרבי, אין משמעותה של מסירת נפש לעלות לגג ולקפוץ ממנו חס וחלילה. To have self-sacrifice doesn't necessarily mean jumping off the roof. That's not what we're asking people to do. You're not asked to jump off a roof. חס וחלילה. On the contrary, מסירת נפש צריכה להיות בלי רעש ושעון, לא ברעש השם. When you sacrifice yourself, it should be without anyone noticing. The whole reason people go up on a roof and want to jump off is because they need attention. On the contrary, you don't need any attention for this. There's no sturm, there's nothing. No kind of noise. You do it quietly. Because Hashem is not in the noise, as Yechezkel says. And here it's, not Yechezkel, it's Yeshaya. Yeshaya sees his chariot. He says Hashem is not in the noise. Kilo barash Hashem. Rash in this case was an earthquake, actually. Okay, this is a very interesting thing. Very important point. Incredibly important point. This is just gelled in my head in the last few days. Hashem reveals himself at the end, not in the beginning. When you go and you do an act, it's very uncommon for a person to feel, take the feel away, to awaken a sense of divinity in the act that he's doing. It's very uncommon, it's very difficult. Instead, Hashem appears at the end of the act. At the end. Where it's the hardest. Because at the end, what do we feel? We feel that this is ours. If a person is willing to have self-sacrifice, then that's what the self-sacrifice means. When I'm finished, I need self-sacrifice to go do it. I need to sacrifice a little bit of my time, my effort, my money, whatever it is. But the real sacrifice is giving up my credit, my credit account, my issues, my feeling of being, my feeling of importance, because I just did this. That's the real self-sacrifice. The sacrifice is really at the end. Because all the monetary means, I know that they'll come back. But giving up my self-image, that I'm a successful person, I did this, and I'm worthy of so on and so forth, that is very difficult to give up. And that you give up at the end of the act. So actually the revelation of Hashem in a mitzvah is after you've finished it. Not while you're preparing to do it, and not while you're doing it. There's 2-3 times. Before you do the mitzvah, when you're doing it, and after you're doing it. So
Hashem won't reveal himself before, and he won't reveal himself. Where do we see that? In Avram, in the Akedah, and the binding of Isaac. So how did it work? That in the beginning, Avram had to wake up by himself. He had to prepare by himself. He went by himself. He did it by himself. There's no sign of Hashem anywhere. At the very end, then Hashem shows up. I'm not even talking about the very end when the angel tells him. It's after that Hashem says. After the whole thing, Hashem reveals himself to him. That's the real essence of revealing Hashem. So the same thing. Where did I see this? I told you about Shir Shirim on Sunday. The time that Shlomo, if you read it carefully, you see that the time that Shlomo, the King Solomon, has a revelation is at the end of the Aliyas Neshama, not at the beginning. The revelation is after he's finished. There's an Aliyas Neshama, the soul goes up, and it comes back down, it returns, and then there's the revelation. It's at the very end. Just as you're finishing, or right after you finished. That's when it is. This needs to be discussed a lot more, but again, the reason is because Hashem is willing to reveal himself if you're willing to have self-sacrifice, to give up your yeah, that's the bittul. So, מסירת נפש צריכה להיות בכל הפעולות היומיומיות, עוטה מאזנו ועוצם עיניו. כן. Sorry, לא ברעש Hashem is from Malachim. I said it was from Yeshaya. So this pasuk is from Yeshaya. He closes his ear and he closes his eyes, shuts his eyes. אפילו לגבי לימוד התורה דרושה מסירת נפש. Even with learning Torah, you need self-sacrifice. לא לקחת את התורה אליו, כי אם לקחת את עצמו אל התורה. כשיש רצון באמת, ודאי יושג הדבר. So he's not taking the Torah to him. He's not saying, what does the Torah tell me? In the sense of, let me fashion it according to my understanding, but rather, what is the Torah instructing me? What is it telling me? How should I change based on what the Torah is saying? And when there's true will, you certainly attain what he's looking for. שישנה מסירת נפש של פנחס. הרי גם פנחס אליהו שיבשר את הגאולה, כלומר כל העבודה העכשווית ההכנה למשיח, לעשות את העולם מקדש לו יתברך. And when there is self-sacrifice is obviously what we call identity. No, in this case it's not. This is all submission. Then, when there is such a thing, then that's what causes not just that the angel will come into you to give you strength, or whatever is needed from above will come into you, but also that Eliyahu, he's the harbinger of the Geula, of the redemption. Meaning all the work that you're doing, if you do it in this way, in this manner of Mesiras Nefesh, of sacrificing yourself, not building up your image, but rather doing it for the sake of Hashem, that is the harbinger of the Mashiach. That is what brings the Messiah, to make the entire world like a temple for Hashem. Very good. So we finished the second part. We finished the first part of the Sichot. There's two more parts. Two more Sichos, actually.
To be continued.
God willing, tomorrow.